is our evaluation question 7.
Yeah. So, looking back on your preliminary task, what do you feel that you have learned in the progression from your full into the full product?
So our preliminary task was a match on action piece, and it consisted of 3 shots. One shot was and I'll show it on screen now, but the first shot was a side on angle walking towards the door, another one close up of the door handle, and then the other one was behind the door, inside the room, behind the door, and then you open and you walk through. I'll put it on screen now.
We actually think
So for that shot we used 3 cameras and we filmed all at the same time. So we'd have one person who would direct it, which was, I think it was our teacher, who'd put a hand up, you'd press the button on each camera and then you'd film it all, and then simply just cut and paste, put it together, and that was it. Yeah, Harry can talk about our progression from then till now in the use of tripods and shoulder rigs and everything. So yeah.
So basically, through our preliminary, I can't say
preliminary.
Yeah, that one. Through that, we it was pretty bad, to be honest. Where we've come from, it wasn't great.
It wasn't bad, but
it wasn't
compared
up
to
to
what
our
we've
standards
learned
now.
Across the year, it's completely different.
So we decided, we want it to be realistic. We want it to have the shots. We want you to feel like you're actually there and you can believe it. So we decided that we wouldn't use a tripod because that stabilizes it too much.
Yeah, and in the film conventions, and it's on our blog and on different areas where we've written and spoken about it, but the typical film conventions of a horror and a thriller is that you use a lot of handheld shots to create realism and authenticity, and we didn't want to break that rule because we felt that was one of the most important rules that helped to keep that continuity and realism, and we didn't want to break that. In the title sequence is we just used our hands and as I said, handheld shot, and that was because it was a lot of close-up shots, so we didn't have to need a shoulder rig which is a bit more bulky. We could really create a more intimate filming, and then when it came to the opening sequence, we used the shoulder rig. But yeah, we used the shoulder rig.
Shots, wasn't it?
Yeah, so there was a lot of
over the road.
Yeah.
So the one where I'm taking my shoes off, I'm bending down like that, and then Dan's behind me. You had to use the shoulder rig for that because Dan was good 20 odd metres away, wasn't it?
Yeah,
so,
and the one we pan you walking across.
Yeah.
If I was doing that with my hands, I
would have been shaking so much.
Yeah, and at the same time, I know you've got to use handheld shots, but it can't be shaky because then it wouldn't look good at all. So we used the shoulder rig to help us pan round and just create this really cinematic shot, really. So yeah, our progression from our preliminary task to now, from using our tripods and shoulder rigs and things like that, we've progressed massively, and we've really gone into detail of what will make our piece the most realistic.
So the second part. Let's look up there.
Now we're going to talk about our progression using auto and manual focus from our match on action to our final piece. So throughout our progression from the match on action to our final piece, we used manual focus for pretty much every single shot. I don't think there's one shot where we used autofocus. So in our match on action, for all of the shots, we set up the focus and then we literally just started recording. There wasn't really any, we didn't have to change the depth of field or anything. We literally just filmed with the same focus throughout for the match on action. Sequence, we used this concept of depth of field. This was to create a bigger environment and create this more sinister, dark feel. This is because we felt that by having your depth of field, it just adds that extra dimension and creates a more interesting piece, in my opinion. So you saw one thing either in the foreground or the background, and then we changed the focus to, as I said, create that depth of field. So our post-production was probably one of the most time-consuming pieces from our Match on Action to our final piece, and it took us a very long time to complete.
It didn't really take us long at all.
No, cut and pasted it, put it all together,
and then
that was pretty much it. However, when it came to our opening sequence and title sequence, and I've discussed this in my blog, it took us a very, very long time. We had to start off by, well, in the title sequence, I didn't really have a set list that I would do and I'd get through. I'd literally just cut it, put it all together, didn't really think about how it was going to look until I started talking to my friends, and they were telling me about colour corrections and different sequences I can use, and that's when I started looking at Seven and taking inspiration from that, as it goes from your live shots to a blank screen with the text running throughout, and we thought this looked really effective, so we used the same sequence as Seven does in their title sequence and just implemented it into ours, but gave it a different twist by having different techniques.
That was pretty much the way we did it for our entire opening sequence. You know, our opening sequence was very much inspired by Seven.
Yeah, and Psycho and
Psycho, and we thought, well, we should combine everything together and we'll just put a massive twist on it. We'll put a massive twist on it.
Yeah. In the opening sequence, there was a lot more post-production. So for when we started, we obviously cut and pasted and put everything together to get just a general idea of what the film would look like. And then we went on to colour corrections. So I asked my teacher what was the best way to go around colour correcting, and he suggested that I went through each shot and I changed the exposure, the shadows and the highlights, and got them in between 25 to 100% like percent levels on the video scopes. So I had to go through each shot and I had to raise the exposures and lower the shadows, just to have the brighter and the darks darker, just to create a really contrasting piece. And if you look at most back at our preliminary task, when it came to colour corrections, we didn't use any colour corrections at all. This is probably because we were a bit naive and we just wanted to get it all done and put it together, so we didn't really focus on putting any colour corrections on. So yeah, we didn't do any colour corrections for our preliminary task. So during our preliminary task, we didn't really focus on audio at all.
We didn't do any audio at all.
We just literally all we did was the shots, was put it all together.
Clip it together.
Yeah, we didn't do any ADR, we didn't do any post-production audio. We literally just used the footage we had and the basic audio we had and put it all together. However, in our opening and title sequence, well, not really our title sequence, but especially our opening sequence, on deadline day we had to go over our audio because Sir said that it was wrong. He said that didn't really convey any relationships between the characters, so we had to add an audio on of Harry saying...
Yeah. That took forever, because to get it right and to make it sound realistic, it just, because I wasn't in the moment and because I wasn't actually doing it, I was just sat there saying stuff and I couldn't get it quite right.
Yeah.
And it just didn't sound very realistic, so what we had to do, because if I was right next to the Mac, then it just sounded like I was shouting down the camera, and I wasn't. So we had to stand a good like 5 meters away from the Mac to
in
make
relation
sure,
to the camera.
to make sure that everything was all right. And
so and one other problem that we found when we were doing our ADR was trying to sync the lips with what you were saying. But
it's all about timing.
Yeah, but however, when we looked back at some of the shots, we thought that the audio is pretty good, and at the end of the day, we're not a Hollywood movie company, and you can't get perfect audio. So
where we have used audio, it's quite useful that I'm not actually facing the camera.
Yeah, you've got your back to it.
Towards it, so it doesn't actually matter where we put it in. So in that regard, it kind of worked out pretty well.
Yeah. Our Match on Action piece, our preliminary task, we didn't use any music or Foley sounds or anything. So yeah, I think the reason that was because, as I said, we were naive to it all. We didn't really think about adding in any music.
We're just lazy, and we just
and it was our first
done.
piece that we had to do, and it was something that we had to do it. It was I didn't know anything about editing. I was really naive to it all, so I didn't really think about much for that. But
within our opening scene.
So our progression from the title, from our preliminary tasks to our end product, when it comes to music and Foley, is that we realised how hard it was, and we've learned that it's not easy. It's something you've got to put time into and really think about what sounds will help to add this authentic, realistic environment, something that's not fake or unreal, but something that you could put yourself into that situation easily because of the sounds. And I think sound did a big thing. So for us, when it came to the title sequence, the music we used was it's an ambient soundtrack that we found off YouTube. A really sinister, dark, slow, eerie soundtrack.
It went perfectly with the
and it had bits where there'd be a beat, and we changed the title on the beat, and it worked perfectly.
It just with that sound, it just made it like flow more. It kind of brought the whole title sequence together. So I thought it was really good.
Yeah. So as I said, for the title sequence, in that soundtrack that we got, it had like cars passing in the background, which was perfect because our location was very close to a road. So the sound couldn't have been, the music couldn't have been any better. And when we were looking at our soundtrack, we made sure that we got music that was royalty free, and we checked in the description whether we could use it, and the producer of that music said that it was completely fine we could use it as long as we gave acknowledgement to them in our title sequence or any projects that we use with that sound, which is what we did. So yeah,
opening sequence, we used a song called Pumped Up Kicks.
Yeah, so there's a shot for Harry, and I'll put it on screen now.
I'm wearing my headphones, and I'm just like bobbing around, like walking home, wearing my headphones. Just want to get home. It's a general good song.
Yeah, and it's got we chose it purposely because during the song, especially the part we picked, it's got a lyric where it says
I'm
coming for you, or I'm coming for you, and it's that sort of thing that when you watch the film, it's one of those films where you've got to watch it twice to be able to pick up on those subtle little hints throughout, which I think
we tried to put the hints in there to try and see if you were watching close enough.
Yeah.
And to try and see if you could, because I don't know about you guys, but when I'm watching a film, I definitely think, what do I think's going to happen at the end?
Yeah,
and I think within every film there are always clues about what's going to happen towards the end.
Yeah,
you just don't see them until you watch it a second time.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's what we tried to do with that.
So when it came to the opening sequence, we didn't really want to add a soundtrack that ran throughout, like a song or anything. Apart from that Foley sound of Harry listening to music, that was just something that when you look at Harry's listening to music, and it works really well. It works perfectly, actually.
Especially for when I take my headphones out.
Yeah, and when you watch it, it's one of those bits where I personally think it looks really good, and it just adds to our progression. We like, compared to our preliminary task, we didn't add anything. So at the very end of our opening sequence, we used this royalty-free soundtrack, and it's really high-pitched soundtrack, and it just helped to build suspense and tension, and yeah, that was pretty much it.
And then at the very end, when Dan gets the knife towards me, I'm sitting on the floor, and he goes like that, and then I shout stop. There's a massive like bang sound to emphasise what happened, and just to show like excitement and to build that up as well, and making people wanting to watch the rest of the film.
Yeah.
That's